Imagine being the absolute best in the world at what you do.
Right.
You're at the very peak of your physical and mental prime, and you are just dominating your field in a way that, people are already writing history books about.
Yeah, you have the fame, the legacy, the generational wealth.
Exactly. And then at the absolute height of your powers, you just decide to hand back the keys and walk away.
Which is, it completely defies everything we're conditioned to expect from elite athletes. Right?
Totally.
Usually we see competitors holding on until the bitter end, until their reflexes naturally fade, or a younger, hungrier generation physically forces them out.
Yeah. Voluntarily leaving the throne is almost unheard of.
It really is.
But that is the exact reality currently facing four-time Formula One world champion Max Verstappen.
It's wild to even think about.
It is. We are looking at this highly unprecedented situation where a driver in his late 20s, theoretically with another decade of racing ahead of him, might simply pull the ripcord at the end of the season.
Yeah.
So today, our mission for this deep dive is to cut through all the paddock gossip and explore the actual mechanics of these retirement rumors.
Right, because there's a lot to sort through.
There really is. We are going to examine the fundamental changes to the race cars, the massive shifts in his personal life, and this incredibly complex legal escape hatch he might use to exit his contract.
It's a fascinating intersection, really, of high-level engineering, personal psychology, and, sports contract law.
Absolutely.
The clues are heavily documented in the sources, but seeing the full picture requires us to connect the technical regulations directly to the human being actually sitting in the cockpit.
Okay, let's unpack this. Before we look at how Verstappen could leave F1, we first need to understand why he is so deeply frustrated right now.
Right.
And to do that, we really have to look at the machine he's being asked to drive.
The 2026 technical regulations.
Yeah, which, if you just read the headlines, they actually sound like a racing purist's dream, don't they?
On paper, absolutely.
The cars are mandated to be 30 kilograms lighter, the wheelbase is 200 millimeters shorter, and the physical track width of the car is narrower.
Right.
So, in theory, that should cure the boat-like handling drivers have been complaining about for years and, make the cars incredibly agile.
You would definitely think so, based on those chassis dimensions alone. A lighter, shorter car is always going to change direction faster.
Right.
But the chassis is really only half the equation here. The real revolution, and honestly the fundamental root of Verstappen's anger, lies underneath the engine cover.
Oh, the power unit.
Exactly. Formula One is undergoing this massive philosophy shift in how the power unit actually generates speed.
So we're talking about the move to 100% sustainable fuels and this highly controversial 50-50 power split.
Yes.
The split between the combustion engine and the electrical system, right?
That 50-50 split is the absolute core of the problem. F1 completely overhauled the hybrid system for 2026.
Okay, break that down for us.
Well, to understand why it's so disruptive, we have to look at what they took away and what they added. So they completely removed the MGUH.
The motor generator unit for heat, right?
You got it. It was this highly complex piece of technology that recovered energy from the red-hot exhaust gases that spin the turbocharger.
Okay, so that's gone.
Right, it's gone. And because that exhaust recovery is gone, the sport had to massively boost the MGUK to compensate.
And that's the kinetic motor, the one that recovers energy under braking.
Exactly.
And the numbers on that kinetic motor are just wild. Our sources show it went from putting out 120 kilowatts to a staggering 350 kilowatts.
It's a massive jump.
To put that into perspective for you listening, 350 kilowatts is roughly 470 horsepower.
Yeah.
That is the equivalent of taking the entire engine of a Porsche 911 and adding it to the car purely as electrical energy at the push of a button.
It's a staggering amount of electrical power. It means roughly half of the car's total output is now entirely tied to a battery. And that fundamentally alters the physical act of driving. Think of the old V8 era of Formula One as a pure sprinter, right?
Just raw, mechanical, flat-out aggression from the starting gun to the finish line.
Exactly. The 2026 era is more like a marathon runner who has to constantly look down at a smartwatch to monitor their heart rate, knowing they'll just collapse if they spike it too early.
So you aren't just a driver anymore, you're practically a high-speed battery manager.
Yes. You really are.
Because our sources detail all these new tactical driver controls. You have an overtake mode, a boost mode, and a recharge mode.
Don't forget the active aero features.
Right, the aero that dynamically changes while the car is moving.
The active aero is a perfect example of this increased digital workload. So instead of a fixed wing, Drivers now have Z mode for the corners.
Z mode.
Yeah, where the flaps physically angle up to grab the air and force the car into the track for maximum downforce.
Okay, makes sense for cornering.
Right, but then on the straights, they have to manually engage X mode.
Where the flaps flatten out to reduce air resistance and save the battery.
Exactly.
And this is where the disconnect becomes painfully clear for a driver like Verstappen. I mean, right now he's sitting in 9th place in the championship standings.
Yeah, which is unheard of for him recently.
His best result was a 6th place finish, followed by a deeply frustrating 8th. But when you listen to his post-race interviews, his complaints aren't just about lacking top speed.
No, they're much more fundamental.
He is calling these cars undrivable and anti-driving. He even compared this heavy battery management style of racing to Formula E on steroids and Mario Kart.
The anti-driving comment is definitely the most telling. Like, in previous eras, massive technological advancements enhance the physical bravery of the driver.
Right.
Take ground effect, for example. That's the aerodynamic philosophy of shaping the bottom of the car like an inverted airplane wing to literally suck the chassis down to the asphalt.
And ground effect rewarded a driver for pushing harder, right? The faster you went, the more grip the car generated.
Exactly. It was visceral. But the 2026 regulations shift the core competency away from that mechanical feel and entirely toward digital energy management.
Which demands extreme lift and coast driving.
Yes.
Let's break down lift and coast for a second because it sounds incredibly counterintuitive for a racing driver.
It really is.
Normally, you keep your foot pinned to the floor until the last possible millisecond before smashing the brake pedal, right?
Right. But under the new regulations, that aggressive style depletes the battery far too quickly. So with lift and coast, drivers are forced to take their foot completely off the accelerator pedal 100 meters or more before they even reach a braking zone.
Wow.
Yeah, they have to let the kinetic motor drag the car's speed down to harvest electricity, and only then do they touch the physical brakes.
So it's essentially regenerative braking on a terrifying scale.
Precisely.
It's so automated and software dependent that Fernando Alonso actually joked that the team's hospitality chef could probably drive the car through the high-speed sections because the software is doing all the work.
I mean, it essentially takes human bravery right out of the equation.
Yeah.
Now, we should note that the grid is actually deeply divided on this shift. Like, Lewis Hamilton has gone on record stating he finds this new tactical style much more fun to manage.
Interesting.
But on the other side of the aisle, you have Lando Norris, Charles Leclerc, Alonso, and obviously Verstappen, all voicing severe criticisms.
And it isn't just a debate over what's fun, is it? There's a very real, very dangerous safety element to all this digital management.
Absolutely.
We saw that firsthand with the massive 50G crash involving Oliver Bearman and Franco Colapinto.
Yeah, that crash perfectly illustrates the sheer physical danger of the 50-50 power split.
Because of the speed differentials.
Exactly. If you have one driver on a straight who is in a recharge phase, meaning they're lifting off the throttle early to harvest energy, and the car right behind them suddenly deploys boost mode.
With that extra 470 electrical horsepower.
Right. The closing speed is just catastrophic.
You could literally have one car doing 150 miles per hour and decelerating, and the car right behind it on the exact same racing line doing 210 miles per hour and accelerating.
And that leads directly to the phenomenon of clipping, which drivers are just terrified.
Oh, what is clipping? Exactly.
Clipping happens when a car is accelerating down a straight, but the battery suddenly empties before the end of the straight.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the electrical power abruptly cuts out, and the car loses half its horsepower in an instant. It acts like an invisible parachute.
That sounds terrifying. So if the driver behind you doesn't clip at the exact same moment, they're going to plow straight into the back of you.
Exactly. The environment is dictated by software modes rather than predictable racing lines.
So you have a pure old-school racer who feels like the fundamental DNA of the sport, you know, the danger, the bravery, the mechanical grip has been corrupted by software.
Right.
That alone is frustrating. But the physical exhaustion of managing that marathon run a smartwatch is bleeding directly into a massive shift happening in Verstappen's personal life off the track, too.
The two issues are absolutely compounding each other.
Yeah.
I mean, if we look at the broader timeline of his life, it provides crucial context. Verstappen started in Formula One when he was just 17 years old.
And he's 28 now.
Right. He spent his entire adult life inside this high-stakes pressure cooker.
He calls himself an old soul in the sport who just craves a normal life. And when you look at the modern F1 calendar, normal really isn't an option.
Not at all.
We're talking about a grueling 24-race schedule spanning the globe. You are constantly dealing with jet lag, constantly strapped into a simulator, constantly fulfilling media obligations.
And that nomadic lifestyle hits very differently when your personal priorities start to shift.
Like becoming a father.
Exactly.
Mm.
He recently transitioned into fatherhood with his partner, Kelly Piquet. And when you become a parent, your perspective on risk and time naturally evolves.
Of course it does.
Beyond the physical risk of driving a car prone to sudden software-induced speed differentials, there is the guaranteed sacrifice of time.
Yeah, every single weekend spent managing battery life in a car he actively dislikes is a weekend missing a family milestone back home.
It's incredibly telling when you look at the recent comments from his father, Jos Verstappen.
Oh, this was fascinating. Historically, Joss has been the ultimate driving force behind Max's career, right?
Yeah, the quintessential, relentlessly demanding racing father who pushed him to the limit.
But even Joss is looking at the current landscape and calling Max's F1 future bleak.
Yeah, he even admitted to the press that he actually turned off the TV and went back to sleep during a practice session because the cars were so boring to watch.
When the architect of your entire racing life is falling asleep watching you drive, it really highlights a profound, undeniable loss of passion.
Completely. Furthermore, the environment inside the garage isn't providing any comfort right now either.
Right. Red Bull has been dealing with intense internal power struggles.
The sudden departure of longtime team principal Christian Horner midway through last year left a massive leadership vacuum.
And our sources are careful to note that Verstappen was not behind that departure.
Right, he wasn't. But Laurent Mickey's has stepped in to try and steady the ship. Still, that familiar, protective, single-minded bubble Verstappen grew up in is just completely gone.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. We have to talk about the financial reality of this.
The money is wild.
Verstappen is making a reported $70 million a year. I think a lot of people driving to work right now listening to this are probably thinking, I would drive a battery-powered spreadsheet into a concrete wall every Sunday for a fraction of that money.
I mean, wouldn't we all?
Right, so surely that kind of salary keeps him in the seat? Like, how bad does the day-to-day experience have to be to willingly walk away from that kind of astronomical wealth?
Well, I think it comes down to the concept of diminishing returns.
How so?
Verstappen already has 4 world championships. He's broken countless historical records. He has already secured generational wealth. For a pure competitor who has already summited the highest mountain in his field, money is no longer the primary motivator.
Passion is the ultimate currency.
Exactly. If the visceral joy of the drive is gone, the $70 million paycheck simply doesn't justify the exhaustion, the jet lag, and the time away from his child.
Okay, so the motive is crystal clear. He hates the digital feel of the car, he's exhausted by the 24-race schedule, and he wants to be with his family.
Right.
But wanting to leave and actually being able to leave are two very different things in professional sports.
Oh, absolutely.
He is legally locked into a binding contract with Red Bull until the end of the 2028 season. How does a driver just casually escape a multi-million-dollar legal obligation?
This is where the intricacies of contract law become the deciding factor. Verstappen and his management team actually had early apprehensions about these 2026 engine regulations years before they were implemented.
Really? They saw this coming?
They did. And because of that incredible foresight, they managed to negotiate a very specific performance-related exit clause into his current mega deal.
The ultimate golden ticket.
Quite literally. The clause states that to force Verstappen to honor the contract, Red Bull must provide him with a car capable of winning the championship.
Okay, how is that measured?
Specifically, the metric is that Verstappen must be sitting in the top 2 of the Drivers' Championship standings by the summer break.
Wow. So let's look at the brutal mathematical reality of that timeline.
It's not looking good.
Not at all. He is currently sitting in 9th place. He is 60 points behind the championship leader, who happens to be Mercedes' 19-year-old phenom, Kimi Antonelli, and he is 51 points behind second-place George Russell.
Yeah.
Making up a 50-plus point deficit by the summer break isn't just difficult. I mean, it is essentially a mathematical mountain.
It becomes almost impossible when you look at how the rest of the grid is performing, too.
Right.
The sources highlight Oscar Piastri's brilliant second-place finish recently as a perfect contrast.
Right.
Piastri drove this masterful defensive race, perfectly utilizing his electrical deployment to hold off faster cars.
Proving that rival teams and drivers are successfully adapting to the energy strategies.
Exactly. They're maximizing these new cars, while Red Bull continues to struggle with the basic integration of their power unit.
So what does this all mean? Is he essentially failing his way to freedom?
Pretty much.
It is incredibly ironic. The exact contractual clause that was designed to protect him from being stuck in a slow car is now his only legal mechanism to quit the sport entirely.
It is a fascinating paradox. Lauren Mekies, the new Red Bull boss, has gone on the record saying he firmly believes a faster car will make a happier Max.
He thinks the solution is just to find more aerodynamic grip and straight-line pace.
Right, but this raises an important question regarding his true motivations. If Verstappen's core issue is the fundamental style of driving dictated by the 2026 rules.
The clipping, the extreme lift and coast, the constant software management.
Exactly. Will simply doing those miserable things slightly faster actually solve his lack of enjoyment?
I don't think it does at all. Like, if you absolutely hate playing a specific video game, playing it on a much faster console doesn't make you suddenly love the game.
That is an excellent analogy.
It just means your misery is rendered in higher definition.
Exactly. The core gameplay loop is what's broken for him, which is why the sources indicate that outright, permanent retirement isn't the only option being discussed behind closed doors.
What else are they considering?
There are backdoor alternatives to keep him in the fold. One is a highly lucrative $60 million sabbatical for the 2027 season.
A gap year for a 4-time world champion. That is wild.
Essentially, yes. It would allow him to step away from the grueling calendar, spend a year with his family, and let Red Bull and their new engine partner Ford try to fix the power unit integration.
And it gives the regulators a year to potentially introduce rule tweaks.
Exactly. Then he could decide whether the landscape has improved enough to return in 2028.
Are there any other options?
Another option on the table is shifting him into a global brand ambassador role, which keeps him under the Red Bull corporate umbrella, but crucially keeps him out of the cockpit.
But let's say he does pull that ripcord, whether it's just for a gap year or forever.
Right.
Where does a generational talent like that actually go?
That's the big question.
He's a racer down to his bone marrow. You don't just turn off that level of competitive fire and go sit on a beach sipping cocktails.
No, absolutely not. And the sources provide a very clear, documented roadmap for his post-Formula One life.
Okay, what's he looking at?
Verstappen has a deep, well-known passion for GT3 and endurance racing. He has described having a burning desire to compete in the Triple Crown of Endurance.
That's the legendary 24 Hours of Le Mans and the Nürburgring 24 Hours, right?
Correct.
The track they call the Green Hell.
That's the one. And we know exactly how serious he is about this transition because he actually sought out a real-world outlet for his F1 frustrations recently.
Oh, he did.
Yeah. Just before one of his recent Grand Prix races, while he was publicly calling the F1 cars undrivable, he quietly went and raced in a 4-hour endurance race in Germany.
Wow. What was his reasoning for that?
His stated reason to the media: to find stuff that makes me smile.
He is literally moonlighting in other racing series just to remember what it feels like to enjoy the physical act of driving.
It's incredible.
And he is backing this up with serious business infrastructure, too. He's rapidly expanding his Verstappen.com racing brand. And he just triggered a massive rebrand of Team Redline, a famous esports team, turning it into Verstappen's sim racing.
What's fascinating here is the bridge he's actively constructing.
Between esports and real racing.
Exactly. He is building a direct pipeline between virtual esports talent and real-world GT3 racing. He isn't just looking for a new series to join. He's building a bespoke racing ecosystem where he makes the rules and sets the culture.
It sounds like he's trying to build the raw, old-school racing world he wishes Formula One still was. GT3 and endurance cars are complex machines, absolutely, but they still rely on that visceral mechanical grip. You are fighting the weight of the car and the limits of the track, not managing a battery deployment algorithm.
Precisely. Entering the GT3 and endurance world strips away the intense political maneuvering and the heavy digital overhead that currently defines the F1 paddock.
Yeah.
In his own custom-built ecosystem, he can race pure mechanical machines alongside his friends, entirely on his own schedule without compromising his family life or his passion for the sport.
So bringing all these threads together, right now, Formula One is sitting in this bizarre month-long break because of some early season race cancellations.
Right.
And behind closed doors, the sports stakeholders are in an absolute panic.
Oh, they definitely are.
They are holding critical emergency meetings to discuss immediate tweaks to the 2026 regulations to somehow reduce that terrifying clipping issue on the straights before they lose their biggest draw.
They are terrified of the global optics. I mean, losing your most dominant generational star because he publicly, repeatedly declares your new, highly touted green regulations to be anti-driving is a PR nightmare that the sport might not recover from quickly.
Definitely. And if you drive a modern car, you might be wondering why the internal politics of a European racing series matter to you.
It's a fair question.
But this isn't just sports drama. This is a massive philosophical battle playing out on a global stage. It is about the future of automotive technology and human interaction with machines.
Very true.
Formula One is grappling with a question that society at large is going to have to answer. Should we prioritize eco-relevance, efficiency, and software management? Or should we prioritize human skill, tactile feedback, and the joy of the experience?
It is the ultimate tension between efficiency and experience. Formula One desperately wanted to remain highly relevant to the road cars of the future, hence the massive focus on sustainable fuel and battery reliance.
Right.
But in doing so, they may have sterilized the very danger and mechanical romance that made the sport captivating in the first place.
Which brings us to a final thought for you to turn over in your mind long after you finish listening to this deep dive.
It's a profound one.
It really is. If Max Verstappen, arguably the absolute greatest driver of his generation, a man literally born and bred to control a vehicle at its absolute physical limits, is willing to quit because cars have become too digital.
Too automated and too focused on battery management.
Exactly. What does that mean for the rest of us? Take a look at the everyday consumer cars currently rolling off assembly lines right now.
They are heading down that exact same highly automated, battery-managed, software-dictated trajectory.
They are. So if the best driver in the world feels like the machine has taken over and ruined the drive, are the rest of us slowly being engineered out of the driver's seat entirely?